Hi, I'm Michelle Chalfant, psychotherapist, holistic life coach, and human just like you, learning to navigate life's challenges. With over 25 years experience, I teach people how to get healthy using the adult chair model. The adult chair model is where simple psychology meets grounded spirituality, and it teaches us how to become healthy adults. From anxiety and depression to codependency and relationship issues, you can use the adult chair for just about anything. Each week, I share practical tips, tools, and advice from myself and a wide range of experts on how to get unstuck, how to live authentically, and how to truly love yourself, all while sitting in your adult chair. Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast, Darlene Lancer.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Michelle. I love talking about codependency and the chance to address your audience.
Yes, and I'm a big fan of your work. I was telling you that I have your books, and it was just such an honor. It's an honor to have you on today. So, as one of the codependency experts out there in the world, God knows we need more information from as many people as possible on codependency, for sure. So, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So, I was wondering about just starting out with like the basics. So, what are the stages of codependency? Let's just start with that. When we talk about codependency and recovery, let's just start out with that question.
Okay, well, there's usually that's described as 3 stages, which parallel actually the stages of alcoholism. So there's the early stage, the middle stage, and late stage. And recovery, you go through, and it's a decline. Mm-hmm. And just like an alcoholic goes through social drinking, abusing alcohol, then becoming dependent on alcohol, mm-hmm. and declining mentally, mm-hmm. physically, spiritually, emotionally. And then the same for codependent. And then when you get into recovery, you go through an early stage, you're learning information, you're starting to move your focus back on yourself. And then the middle stages, you're taking you're doing new behavior. Mm-hmm. And then the later stages, you're really feeling more autonomous, you're assertive, you have good boundaries, and then you start expressing yourself more in the world. Mm. Your world is not just that other person. You're not hiding who you are anymore. Mm-hmm. So I call it like self-esteem in action as being self-empowered.
Oh, I like that. You know, I often will say that codependency is an addiction. Would you agree?
Well, it sets up a process, mm-hmm. of addiction.
Yeah.
So what happens is we're usually starting in childhood, we become alienated from who we really are because of faulty parenting. Mm-hmm. And then we keep trying to fill up that emptiness or feel more alive by connecting to something outside of ourselves. And that could be a person. I also include substances and processes in my definition of codependency. Mm-hmm. So I would include addicts too. Mm-hmm. But the more you try to fill yourself up from the outside, mm-hmm. you know what happens? You get further and further away from who you are. It's like chasing, something that's really inside of you, but it's out. You're looking out there. So it's like you're running away from yourself. And then you feel more alienated. And if you lose that thing, or you try to have some abstinence, like you break up or you quit your drug or something, you're going to start feeling all of those feelings that you've been running from. This emptiness, depression, mm-hmm. Alienation, shame, sadness. And that's why breakups are so hard for codependents.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes a self-fulfilling or kind of feedback system where you keep looking for something out there. You feel more alienated from yourself, so you need more of it. Just like an addict needs more of the drug to feel okay.
Right.
So mm-hmm. you become enmeshed with someone and then you can't bear being without them.
Yes.
You think I was doing fine when I was alone. I was very independent.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a relationship and I don't know what's happening to me. I can't go anywhere without him or her.
And then, so when we think about the stages of recovery, what are some things that when people recognize, wow, this sounds like me, like this sounds like I might be codependent. What are the stages? Like what is the first thing that someone would start doing right away?
To get better?
Yeah, to get better.
First of all, learn information, get information. So unlike when I started my journey, we have the internet and there's so much information available. And then there's meetings, Codependence Anonymous, and Al-Anon meetings. If you have a relative that's an alcoholic, there's Nar-Anon. If you have a relative or boyfriend or girlfriend that's an addict. And so getting information and starting to talk about yourself and other people, because one of the things that happens in these toxic relationships or where there's substance abuse is we start to hide. And that's because of shame. And it might be also because of the control exerted by our partner. So we keep contracting. Our life gets smaller. We become more fearful. And so you want to get information and reach out. And that's a more open system. That's a sign of health. Compare it to a dictatorship government where they control the information and you can't say what you want, what you feel and what you think. That's what happens in a dysfunctional relationship. You start hiding the truth from your family and friends. You maybe want to protect the reputation of your partner. You want to protect your own reputation. These are also symptoms of denial, that you're trying to cover things up. You don't want to tell anyone you're being abused because you feel ashamed of it.
Well, I think a lot of people don't even know, though, that they're being abused and controlled.
Well, that's the first step. So there's the information. So I didn't know that I was being emotionally abused. And wow, when I found out that term, it was like a light bulb went on.
Yes.
And I have people tell me that too. So getting information. And then the next thing is turning the focus on yourself. And that could take years, actually.
Yeah.
But, things are speeding up. Our whole environment is speeding up with technology, and so is healing speeding up.
I'm feeling the same thing. I'm seeing my clients now, like, bam, like, wow, that would have taken years and it's so much faster now. Right. Thank goodness.
Yeah. When I was first in 12-step meetings, no one talked about trauma. No one talked about domestic violence. No one used the word intimacy.
Yeah.
Or PTSD. So now that's in the general, conversation.
Yeah.
Public conversation.
Right.
So it's more readily available. And so turning the focus off of your partner and relationship and focusing on yourself, because often people go to these meetings thinking they're going to help someone else. I know I did. I thought my husband was the one with the problem. And it took me maybe about 3 years to realize I wasn't just going to help him and fix the relationship, that I had to really look at myself, because that's kind of your day one of sobriety.
Yeah.
So you could be, trying to do things to change your partner, to help the relationship, which is a good thing. But until you really start looking at your own behavior, that might be your first sober day.
Wow.
If you want to analogize it to that.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to really listen to people in your circle that love you and that care about you. And those people are the ones that are going to say to you, hey, your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whomever they're not treating you well, or what's that all about? Or like, really pay attention when you keep hearing the same messages from people that love and care about you. Because I was sharing with you before we started the show, a lot of people don't even know that they're in these codependent relationships. They feel very cared for. They're just caring, loving people. It's like, no, you're going above and beyond, and you've lost yourself. You don't even know who you are. And when that focus of the relationship is other person and not self at all, that's a problem right there. So I think that's important for sure. Tell us about shame. I know you wrote a whole book on conquering shame and codependency. Talk to us about shame with codependency.
Well, I think it's a core symptom, and a lot of the other symptoms of codependency are ways to manage the shame.
Yeah.
Or you could say defenses to shame. So shame causes us to be indecisive. It causes us to be perfectionistic. It can cause us to try to caretake someone else because you want them to need you so they won't leave you. You want to feel important. Shame causes denial, which is a hallmark of addiction. And it's I have a whole chapter in Codependency for Dummies on denial. Just as I said, it took me 3 years to realize that I had issues that I had to work on. So in many ways, shame causes fear, causes anxiety. There's something called shame anxiety. A lot of codependents have anxiety. It causes depression. It causes low self-esteem and self-criticism. That can lead us to perfectionism and trying to manipulate other people. It sets up faulty beliefs like I'm only lovable if I'm loved. Well, then how are you going to make sure that someone loves you? Well, maybe you have to hide who you really are because you don't like who you are, or you're afraid you'll be judged, or you're going to be a pleaser. So someone will continue to love you and behave the way you want them to behave. So everything circles back to the shame.
How do you define shame?
Well, it's a profound feeling of alienation, not just from other people, but from yourself.
Yeah.
And it's a very visceral, primal feeling.
Yeah.
And it's very, very painful because we feel we're the only one. It's actually called narcissistic shame. That doesn't have anything to do with narcissism.
Yeah.
But it means that I'm unique. I'm the only one that feels this. And there's something wrong with me, like I'm an alien. And you feel like outside, you could be at a dinner with other people and you're having a shame attack. We call it a shame attack. And it's like there's a veil and it makes you want to hide, but you can't. As an adult, you can't run away. You know, you're probably not going to go like this, like a kid would.
Yeah.
You know, hang your head and rounded shoulders. That's a posture of shame and self-protection. So what happens is we contract. So your face might get rigid, and you maybe don't take in all the information that's going on because there's fear. So now you think people are judging you, and that somehow that you are different in a bad way, that they don't want to connect with you. So you just kind of withdraw into yourself. Now, some people have the opposite reaction and they will go on the attack. But mostly for like a narcissist might do that. So mostly for codependents, they will attack themselves and withdraw.
So it's this inward, it's like this implosion of self and they start attacking themselves. Okay.
The feeling I want to just melt into the floor. I just want to disappear. I can't get up and run out of the room because that would bring more shame on me, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to kind of disappear. So you actually psychologically disappear. You don't hear what's going on. You can't follow conversations. You get confused.
And this is your definition then of what happens when you have a shame attack. That's what that means.
This is some of, and it's very, it's like sympathetic nervous system response. So there's fight, flight. So I mentioned attack and flee. Okay. And then there's freeze. So a lot of times people would just, what I'm describing is kind of freezing, but you can't think clearly. Someone
we disassociate too. I mean, we're just not even in the body, and we're thinking, I don't even know what they're saying to me when they're talking to me and they're staring at me. Yeah.
Right. So they're fleeing emotionally, psychologically.
And this is happening not because anyone outside of us is saying anything. It's just all internally happening inside of ourselves.
Well, it could be either. So this is the thing. I write about codependents have internalized shame. Mm-hmm. And what that is, it's usually starts in childhood. And it's not just one time you felt shame, which is a normal emotion, just like anger, sadness, fear. Mm-hmm. But when it becomes kind of ingrained in you, mm-hmm. it's called internalized shame. And it starts when you have severe trauma as a child, or then that could include anything from a divorce to being beaten, or chronic. It could be smaller events, but they're consistent and chronic.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. I was just going to ask you about that, because people, when they think of trauma, they think of this, again, like a big event. Mm-hmm. But these very small chronic, what we call, I guess, is it Jonice Webb? I think it's Jonice Webb, the childhood emotional neglect. Like, it's like our emotions or our needs are just not, our emotional needs are not tended to.
Yeah, you could think of it as microtraumas.
Yes. And they're tiny. And we may grow up in a lovely family, and my parents are at all the soccer games or the cheerleading or whatever they're watching us. But emotionally speaking, if we have parents that are not able to tend to our emotions, that creates these little micro traumas. And this also can then lead to internalized shame. Correct? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the difference between regular shame, where it just comes and goes, mm-hmm. And it's, maybe something happens, you make a faux pas or whatever, someone insults you and puts you down in a way. Mm-hmm. But it's when it becomes internalized, then you can do it to yourself. You don't need the external provocation. Mm. It could be just at home and maybe you can't fit into your clothes, and you start shaming yourself that you're fat,
Yeah.
And you start, that critic starts shaming you. And some people have like a killer critic that just wants to destroy them. Mm. Other times it sounds like a scolding teacher or angry mother or father. So I always tell people, start to get to know your inner critic. Yeah. Start to change. I wrote a whole book on 10 steps to self-esteem, to working with self-criticism. And that's something that you can change. Mm-hmm. And it goes a long way to starting to chip away at that, mm-hmm. that shame. And the other, I mentioned shame anxiety. Mm-hmm. And I think I mentioned depression. So they used to say, the analysts used to say, well, depression is anger turned inwards. Mm-hmm. So it's unexpressed anger that you turn against yourself. Well, that's what shame is. They didn't talk about shame, but shame is when you start attacking yourself. So you're abusing yourself all the time. So I have clients come in and say, well, I've just been down and I don't know why. And then we start tracing it back, and like something happened. Maybe someone didn't return their email or call back, or they made some mistake, or they think they made a mistake at work or mm-hmm. something mm-hmm. like that. And so then they start doing a number on themselves. And this shame attack continues, just kind of goes on. They're not even aware of it. It goes on for days and days, and pretty soon they're in a funk. Mm. Or maybe they didn't do something they planned to do for themselves because they thought they had all kinds of reasons in their head that they're not going to do well at it. They don't know enough, or they talk themselves out of it. And then they feel guilty or sad that they didn't honor their needs and wants. They denied them. That goes back to the denial. So codependents grow up, and you mentioned their emotional needs not met. Mm-hmm. So then we start thinking they're not important. So that's a sign mm-hmm. of codependency. You think your needs aren't important. You put other people's needs first, other people's wants, other people's feelings. Codependents think if they're assertive, it sounds mean.
Yeah.
They think it sounds bossy and mean. They think if they say no to someone, it sounds selfish.
Yes.
That's and maybe their parent even called them selfish.
Yes.
And shame their wants and needs. It's natural for a kid to start to demand what they want. I mean, they say the terrible twos, but that's an important stage of development. So if you have a parent that squashes that, then that's shaming it. So you learn, if I'm going to be loved and I'm totally dependent on my parents, can't survive on my own, I better not ask for what I want. I better not say no. I'm going to get either punished, ignored, shamed, or I can't express anger because that's not allowed in this house.
Yeah,
or I can't be too sad because my mother or father just wants me to be happy all the time. So you start this accommodating the parent rather than the reverse, the parent honoring your needs. And doesn't mean that a parent has to give in to everything that the child wants, but you just have to respect that and say, I know how disappointed you are that you can't have that candy before dinner or something. You don't shame the child. You allow them the feeling, but you don't always have to agree or meet their desire. So
yeah. I mean, a parent's most important job is, I feel like one of their most important jobs is to reflect the child, like who they are, reflect their sadness and acknowledge their sadness and validate that sadness. But like you said, and I think some parents get confused. It's not about giving into it. Don't give them the candy before dinner, but just say, I know it's hard. I know you're upset. It's okay. But I got, I hear you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I've seen the parents that spank their kids, get upset with their kid. I'm like, oh, wait, no, like reflect. And it's just, it's these little tweaks that we have to make when we're parents. But I want you to please talk about saying no is selfish, is what codependents would think, right? Like, I can't say no. I can't speak up for myself. I can't, no way. Please talk about what selfish means, because I define this quite a bit on this show. So I'd like to hear some.
What definition? Well, I'm curious, what definition?
There's a big difference between, we talk about a lot selfish and self-loving and self-care. And selfish is, it's all about me. I didn't get those brownies and I don't care that you didn't get those brownies. I'm going to go ahead and eat all those brownies. And I don't care that you didn't get any, or I don't care that you haven't had dinner yet. I'm hungry and I'm going to take it all. It's like, that's selfish. That's very different than being self-loving and self-caring and validating your emotions and speaking up for self and getting your needs met. Very different things. So when people say to me, well, isn't it selfish to say, no, I really don't want to go to that restaurant. I'd prefer to go to an Italian restaurant or a Chinese restaurant. No, that's just speaking up for yourself. That's just sharing your opinion. And there's this confusion I hear with people all the time. Oh, that is like, I'm allowed to say that? Yes.
You know what? Yeah. I would also say, if you want to eat it all the cookies or whatever for yourself, don't shame yourself over it. That's a normal feeling too.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you won't share them, but it's okay to want to. Yeah. And then you can think through, well, if I act on that, how's that going to impact my partner?
Yeah.
How is that going to impact my getting what I want from him or her? So you have to think through, that would be another task of a parent to, well, if you do take them all, then what will your brother say? What would your sister say? And how would you feel if they did that to you? So you're educating them about the impact of their behavior. By the way, that's one thing that narcissists don't get growing up.
Yeah.
So, and they have trouble empathizing. So I have a whole book on dealing with a narcissist and how to talk to them, because you don't want to argue. You don't want to blame, attack, defend yourself, apologize. You want to educate them to the impact of their behavior. So you let them know, yeah, okay, so yeah, I have selfish feelings. Everybody does.
So can you talk a little bit more about that? Talk a little bit more about how you would handle narcissism, or because I have some people that have, emailed in and said, well, I don't want to create a child that's a narcissist. Well, no, talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's just like having not indulging your child, for one thing. Narcissists usually, well, now they're seeing that it's about 50% inherited.
Okay.
They used to just blame the mother for that.
Yes. 50% inherited.
Yeah. Well, there's some studies that range all the way from like 40 to 70%.
Really?
But there's some traits that are inherited. So then the other component is the parenting, the environment. So often it's shaming and abusive, the things we're talking about, and or the opposite, indulging. So you make your child feel special, so they have no limits.
Yeah. So
they're better than you. You train them, and some whole families think the whole family is better than everybody else. So it's kind of a ethos of the family that we're better than our neighbors, or we're better than other people, we're better than other races. So that's communicated just by the attitude of the whole family, not just individually.
Talk to us a little bit about shame and recovering from that. What is someone to do if they're realizing as they listen to this today, like, oh my gosh, that's what happens to me, these shame attacks. I go through these shame attacks. What is something that someone can do right away? Like, what are just a couple ideas to help themselves climb out of the shame attack if they're at a dinner party? I really associated right in, when you were talking about that example of being at a dinner party with a group of friends, and all of a sudden your brain starts talking about what a terrible person you are, and we disassociate. What do we do? What would be some things that we could do?
Yeah, I'm thinking of, it could be the simplest thing is like, oh, I talk too much.
Yeah.
I took too much attention. Or, somehow I'm different than them. I'm not as smart as ever. I don't know what they're talking about. I can't follow that conversation. So I think, shame can be easily constellated when there's three people. So maybe you do better one-on-one. As soon as you bring in a third person, then you could feel like the outsider, or a dinner party where there's obviously more than three people. So I think that the longer you stay in that state, I think the younger you begin to feel.
So true.
And more of an child and an outsider. So 3 represents the two parents and the child. So now you become, So I would say, jump in. If you don't know what they're talking about, say, well, how do you know that person? Or tell me more about that hobby, or whatever it is. And try to externalize your focus. And the same thing if you're alone and at home and you have a shame attack. Start looking outside, especially something beautiful, something that attracts your attention. Even balance your checkbook. I mean, this is not going to overcome shame, but it's a shorthand thing that you can do, because shame is so internalizing. And then you sink deeper and deeper into what I call the well of shame, until you start attacking yourself. Then you get depressed. Then you get hopeless. Then under that, you feel like despair and emptiness, and it could drag on for days. So you want to externalize your attention outward. Sometimes I've had people in my office look out the window, and I ask them, how many colors can you name? Or look at a flower or plant and say, how many colors can you see? So you really have to concentrate on something outside of yourself. Play with an animal. Do something creative.
Yeah. I'm hearing mindfulness right there. So you're bringing them right back in that moment, and you're reorienting them with whatever's going on right here, right now in this moment, and taking them out of the story and assumptions that they're swimming around in. Yeah.
If you're driving the car, look around, see how many, where are all the license plates from, something like that.
Yeah.
So mindfulness is important in recovery.
Yeah.
And because you're changing your thinking and your feelings, you have to learn to identify your feelings and needs if they've been denied and shame. So meditation is a wonderful adjunct or important tool in therapy.
Mm-hmm. We talk a lot in the Adult Chair podcast here about feeling our emotions. And I know with codependency, that's such a tough one. You know, it's really difficult because we really don't know what we're feeling. We're so outwardly focused with the other person or others in our family or whomever that we have attached to in that way. That's a tough one, though. So would you have any suggestions for how people would go about starting to feel their emotions? You know, how do they become more inwardly focused? How do they shift that other than just with awareness? But what else can they do?
Well, first, I'd like to make a distinction between feelings and emotions.
Yes.
Because sometimes codependents can have a lot of big emotions, but they can't really name what they're feeling. They say, I'm just so upset.
Yeah.
And I say, well, are you angry? Are you hurt? Are you, feeling ashamed or sad? I'm not sure. So the best way is to connect with your body, because your body is telling you cues all the time. So are you muscles tensing? Do you feel pressure? Do you feel heat? When your jaw tightens, it's often anger. So because we're animals, and originally you bite, when you're angry. So are you making fists? Are your hands getting clenched? And then this posture could be shame. It could be sadness too. And I'll say, what does your body want to do sometimes? And maybe they want to curl up in a ball, or maybe they want to run or fight or make a fist. So getting in touch with your body is very important. And then if you're not used to naming your feelings, and some people can't name their feelings. I have a book in my book, Codependency for Dummies, I list about 200 feelings. But you can download this probably from Google and just sit with it until you come up with a name. And that's something that parents need to do, as you were talking about mirroring and reflecting. So that's how we grow a self, separate from our parents.
Yes.
Parents saying, oh, you're sad. And by the way, if your child comes home because they were bullied, telling them, oh, you shouldn't listen to Tommy, you shouldn't feel that way, that's shaming. You're meaning to help your child, but you're actually shaming their shame. So you say, don't feel that way.
Yes.
You shouldn't feel shame.
No.
So instead you say, oh, that would be horrible. Tell me about it. Describe it to me. And the next thing parents have to do is give help. So listening, empathizing, naming the feeling, and then giving them solutions, or teaching them skills, things they can do. If you didn't get that, you can say it to yourself. You can say, oh, Michelle, you're feeling sad. And calling yourself by name, research has shown, multiplies the effect.
Ooh,
because then it's as if a parent is saying it to you. So you're now parenting yourself. And I think it's helpful to say it out loud.
I do too.
And what's common for many codependents is that anger wasn't allowed for a number of reasons.
Oh, yeah. So true.
Because either religious reasons, or it's not ladylike. I mean, if you're a woman, or maybe you had an angry parent and they were it was too scary to be angry. So a lot of codependents carry around resentment, and they mull over things in their head over and over. All these criticisms of someone that they're upset with. Yeah. Someone they're angry with. And they don't realize that they're angry. They're just having all these negative thoughts about someone. So just saying, listen, you become more mindful, and you say, oh, Darlene, you're angry. And you know what? The resentment can just disappear. Just allowing yourself, and I would say, and it's okay. Yeah. You're feeling selfish, and it's okay. Wow. So whatever you're feeling, it's okay. So the shame about it that causes the problem.
How do you help a codependent begin to feel their anger?
Well, starting with what I said.
Yeah.
Tuning into their body.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to work with their beliefs.
Yes.
So I think that codependency is based on faulty beliefs. I have a blog on my website, whatiscodependency.com, on deprogramming codependent brainwashing. Another one, codependency is based on a lie. Mm-hmm. So you want to get in touch with who you really are. That means accepting all of your feelings. If you repress anger, you're going to repress joy too. Because it's all one system. You know, your amygdala, whatever. You start repressing one feeling, you're going to suffer from not feeling the positive ones too.
I say that all the time, that we have like a yardstick of emotions. So we only want to feel, happy. But you got to feel the sadness and the shame and the fear to feel even more happiness and joy and abundance and excitement on the other end of the spectrum. So yeah, I 100% agree with you. 100%.
There's a psalm, I don't remember which one, about crying in the evening and dancing in the morning.
So. Yes. Oh, wow. Talk to us just, I know we're reaching the end here, but we were talking before we started a little bit about attachment and codependency. What can you share with us about that? What were your findings with that? You said you had some discoveries.
Codependents usually have an insecure attachment style. I'm not going to go into attachment theory, but if you have healthy relationships and you feel secure in who you are, then you have a secure attachment style. And you have more likely to have an interdependent relationship because you can say no without being afraid of being abandoned. So if you have an anxious attachment style, you're always fearful of abandonment. And that goes back to the microtraumas, those little abandonments from your childhood. And so that you're insecure and you constantly want to feel loved, so you'll feel safe, or because you'll feel worthy. And that sets up a lot of dysfunctional behavior, like being too needy, pushing someone away, pursuing someone who's unavailable. I go a lot into it in my books and some of my blogs. And then you might have the opposite, where you are more a distancer. So you're going to pull away from people rather than move towards them. So you want to the goal is to become more secure in who you are and be able to say yes to intimacy and say no to, whatever. If you can't say no to someone, then you're going to be afraid of getting close because you'll be afraid of being smothered. So people that are more distancers maybe had a parent that was overbearing, a helicopter parent, or maybe they think if they get too close, they'll be shamed, abused, abandoned. And actually distancers and pursuers, which are mirror each other's unconscious. So I think I'm going to get into too much of that whole thing, but I write a lot about it in my book on shame. And so if you want to change your attachment style, I say just overcome your codependency.
I like that.
Learn to set boundaries, learn to ask for what you want.
Yeah.
Learn to be more assertive. So I wrote a book and have an ebook on how to be assertive. Those and raising your self-esteem. Those are things you can do that start to change and heal your codependency. Because codependency is learned, as I said, from faulty beliefs and parenting, and it can be unlearned and replaced with new habits and new beliefs.
I like that. We're going to unlearn codependency. I love this.
Well,
this is
it's
amazing.
Hard to unlearn something unless you replace it with something else.
Yeah.
Or it's hard to not think. Don't think of a monkey, and then you think, I can't think of a monkey, and you keep thinking of a monkey.
Right.
You have to replace it with something else.
So true. Have you ever done any or read any research on how many codependents there are? Like typically, like is one out of two people codependent, or you ever?
wouldn't venture to guess, but I think it's higher than 50%. But there's
guess so
no
too.
consensus around a definition either.
I
So you
know.
can't.
I know. And of course there's a scale, but it just seems like a lot of what the traits are for codependency, you know, so many people have. And it's like I feel like when it tips the scale a little bit too much and when it really starts to become a problem is where we have to start taking a closer look at it, I guess. One last question for you. What are the biggest challenges that you find when people are in recovery from codependency?
Well, I recently wrote a blog on why it's hard to receive. So this is more, I think, in the later stages. So I'm not sure if you meant at what point in recovery.
At any point.
Challenges. Okay.
Yeah, any point.
Well, the hardest one is just focusing on yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
Just staying in your own lane.
Yeah.
And you have to keep doing that because, you know, you do it. It's hard in the beginning and then you can slip back into it.
And I feel like there's like self-compassion. Like I had Kristen Neff on the show. I don't know if you know who she is, but gosh,
yes, of course.
So good. And when you say that, I'm like, it's so much of that, like really focusing inward with kindness on the self. It's just so very important. So important.
That's true because what I didn't mention is another skill you have to learn other than how to be assertive and is to nurture yourself because most codependents, given what we talked about in childhood, didn't come from a parent that knew how to mirror and nurture them. And so learning, if you never learn that, then it's hard to know what that is. People used to, a mentor of mine years ago said, well, you're just going to have to learn to love yourself. And I hated hearing that because I had no idea what that means.
I heard the same thing many, many years ago, like 30 years ago. I remember thinking, but how? Like, teach me how. And then I began that journey of, I said, I got to figure this out for myself. But so true. Such a true.
Well, in the Dummies book, there's at the end of the book, there's they have a list of 10 things and there's 10 daily practices and there's 10 ways to love yourself. I can read it if you want.
Yeah, please. I'd love that. Thank you.
So the first one is to have a spiritual practice, whatever that means to you. Another is to receive support. So a lot of times codependents think they have to do it on their own.
Yep.
If they had a parent that was neglectful or if they were parentified as a child, they think they have to do it all. And they even asking for help could feel shameful. Coming to therapy could feel like they're weak or they should be able to solve it themselves. So asking for what you want and asking for support. Meeting your needs. And that's not simple. It's like, well, how do I know what they are?
I was just going to say, what are they? How do we know how to meet them if we don't even know what they are?
That's right.
I remember that one for myself. Like, what do you mean? I don't have needs.
Yeah.
I know what yours are, but I don't know what mine are. Right.
Yeah. And particularly emotional needs are very elusive. So you might think, well, I need food and water and shelter. So in the Dummies book, I list about 40 needs. I have a blog about listing even more, I think. So being able to figure out what you need and then how to fulfill it.
Yeah. So
for a long time, when I was lonely, I didn't even know it. And then after I knew I was lonely, I would just think I'm lonely. I wouldn't reach out to someone.
Yeah.
So those are, you have to know, like, and then have the courage maybe to do that and have fun. That's what you need to do too. So we could get too serious.
Yeah.
Or too focused on a problem or worrying. Worrying comes from shame too and fear. So make sure you have fun in your life and protect yourself. So that's setting boundaries. Accept yourself, as we talked about, self-compassion.
Yes.
So I have a self-love meditation. So it's not just knowing what you need and knowing what you feel, but accepting it. Like I said, if you think you're selfish, well, accept that.
Yes.
It's the first step in change.
And it doesn't mean you have to like it. People say, well, I don't like that part of me. It doesn't, it's not about liking it. Acceptance has nothing to do with liking it. It just is. You just own it, accept it. Right. And then it's not such, there's nothing to push against anymore. It just is. So
exactly.
that's such a good one. Yeah, such a good one.
I think there's like 4 stages of recovery, and there's abstinence. And then if you're using a substance or a practice, and then awareness, getting information, and then acceptance. Okay. And that's the most important one. That could take years.
Yeah.
But then you move into action. Okay. If this is the reality, what am I going to do about it? Now you're into the solution. Because if you're not in acceptance, as you said, fighting against yourself.
Right.
You're like a hamster going around in a wheel. So then I say, gentle yourself. So treat yourself with tenderness and kindness. People are often so rough on themselves and hard on themselves compared to how they treat other people.
So true.
And encourage yourself. And by the way, the unconscious doesn't distinguish between messages from the outside and messages you tell yourself. So you can compliment and praise and encourage yourself all day long. And, your inner child's going to love it.
Yeah.
You need to hear it from someone else. And then express yourself. So don't hide who you are. That's going to lead to problems with yourself and in relationships. And finally, pursue your passions. So do what you want. Don't put off your dreams.
Oh, I love those. Love that. 10 ways you said to love yourself.
Yeah.
I did a podcast. I don't know off the top of my head which one I did, but one of the podcasts I did on codependency on this show, I saw codependency as like really a waking up when we realize this is what's going on. It's like act 2, and it's a very exciting time because you really get to rebuild self. You get to find out who you are. And it's really, it can be, depending on how you see it, just a wonderful second half of your life. Would you agree? I mean, we can look at it with negativity and say, oh my God, I spent all this time. I've been codependent. Look at who I am. Or we can say, wow, now I know what's been going on. Hello. Look at the rest of my life. I get to have this new, beautiful second half of my life now that I've had this wonderful discovery of self. So in all of these 10 steps, wonderful on loving yourself and rebuilding self. So I think it's a fun time of exploration if you want to see it in that way, which feels a lot better than shame.
Some people say, well, how long is it going to take?
Forever.
So, it takes time. It's several years. However, when I work with people, they start to see changes right away.
Yeah.
So it keeps getting better and better and better. So it's not compared to like black and white.
No.
Like here, I'm codependent and then I'm not codependent. It's a journey. And even if you think, well, I'm not going to get to the ideal that I have, it's not a reason not to start, because your life will improve.
Yeah.
Your relationships will improve. Your work will, flourish.
Yeah.
So it keeps getting better and better.
You and I were talking about that before the show. It seems in my journey of codependency, life just got easier. But it's still like I said something to my son the other day and I said, shoot, was that codependent or caring? I'm always asking myself that question. And I make the oops far less than I ever did in my younger years. And so what? But now I can sit and say to myself, oh, well, did it again. Moving on. There isn't that shame voice. And man, I was someone that had shame attacks, no doubt about it. I was the one that was like, oh God, left the body, no idea where I am. And people are talking to me, but it doesn't happen anymore. So I hope that today's show gives people hope for recovery and really having, again, a beautiful act 2 of your life. And you have given us so many tools. Tell us, Darlene, where can people find you? Because I know there are going to be a lot of people that want to get more information on what you're offering.
Okay. If you go to whatiscodependency.com, there's links to my YouTube channel, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. What else? Oh, I have a lot of podcasts on Clip, CLYP.IT, Clip it. And I blog every month. There's probably almost 200 blogs there. Wow. I'm also on medium.com. And so it's all the links are there at whatiscodependency.com. Awesome. You can join my mailing list and get 14 tips for letting go.
Oh, nice. Well, we're going to put all of that in the show notes. So if anyone missed that, if you're driving, listening to the show, don't worry. You can go to theadultchair.com and it'll be right there in the show notes for you. Darlene, thanks so much for being with us today.
And thank you. It was very enjoyable.
It was it was so great to chat with you. Thank you for enlightening us a little bit more about codependency, because I, for one, feel like we can never get enough information on this topic. So thank you for all of your beautiful work. You've done amazing work on this. So thank you for all the work you put into the world. Yeah.
Thank you.